cleanup of environmental hazards at the Department of Energy's Oak Ridge site is an issue that affects us all. DOE is working to address the issue, but it needs citizen input. One way you can help is to take part in the meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a volunteer citizens panel. By attending meetings, you can learn about the cleanup program and voice your opinions. Join us in making our area an even better place to live. For more information, call toll-free or visit us online.
I'd like to thank everybody for attending our monthly SSAB meeting. I'd like to remind members of the public to please sign in on the front roster, to wear your name badges, and to please use the microphone when making comments. A few brief notes here. In the event of an emergency, please exit through the door in which you entered. We do have a secondary emergency exit in the rear of the building down the stairs. But there is a lock that has to be unlocked before you can use that. Anyone needing assistance, please contact the staff wearing the blue evacuation badge. Spencer? Yeah. Remind members, please use your name tents to be recognized. And a reminder that during the presentation question and answer period, we will recognize members first and then members of the public. Announcements. Our next monthly board meeting will be held on February 8th, and the presentation topic is to be determined. If you look at your agenda, we'll go to item number 2, where we'll take comments from the Deputy Designated Federal Officer. Sue?
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to update you all on a few things that have been happening over the last month, maybe 6 weeks or so, since we did not meet in December. First and foremost, I wanted to talk a little bit about the fiscal year 2012 budget. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware that DOE's budget has been enacted. That occurred on December 23rd. And here in Oak Ridge, our FY 2012 budget is approximately $420 million. So that is very good news. It's quite a bit more money than what we had been told to plan toward. As a reminder, the President's budget as well as the House and Senate mark were at the $380 million level, so it's about a $40 million increase from what we were expecting. That's the really good news. The news that's not so good is that there are a lot more control points and or fences around the money in terms of what we can spend it on. So there's not as much flexibility as we are used to in the past. In the past, of course, we basically had funding from 2 different sources, the Uranium Enrichment D&D Fund and then defense funding, and we had some flexibility to maneuver and move money around to address our needs. This time around, as I said, there are more control points that, as an example, at the PBS level, we're not allowed to shift between PBSs for several of our PBSs. So that is creating an additional challenge to us in terms of being able to do all of the things that we have already started and things that we also know that we need to do. We are planning to meet with representatives from TDEC and EPA at the end of this month to go over our budget and to talk about the various control points that we have and to collaborate on what our priorities should be given the constraints that we have to operate under. So that is planned for the end of this month. And after that, after we've had a chance to talk with EPA and TDEC, we'll have more information about how this is all ultimately going to shake out for us in terms of funding for specific projects. So that's the news with regard to the budget. I also wanted to talk a little bit about historic preservation and where we are with the proposed mitigation plan for the East Tennessee Technology Park, the K-25 building, as well as the site itself. Dave Mosley has been working very hard over the past month, a little more than a month, reviewing all of the comments that were submitted from the public on the preferred mitigation plan that we had released and had a meeting on in November. We received 24 different sets of comments from various individuals and organizations, as well as we received a full day of comments during the meeting that we had. And so we've been going through those, making some modifications to the proposed plan, and then touching base with a lot of the signatory and/or consulting parties to let them know about the proposed changes that we're considering in response to all of the comments that we received. It's in fact, just on Monday, Dave and I went to Nashville and we met with the State Historic Preservation Officer, and the state was very helpful in giving us a list of what their expectations are for the plan. So we are in the process of making some improvements to the plan. We plan to make it available to the consulting parties as well as, of course, the signatory parties before the end of this month. And at that same time, we will also make it available for a 15-day public review period. So that's where we are with the schedule. We still are hoping to have sign-off on the memorandum of agreement with the signatory parties by the end of February. So that's our current plan and schedule. A couple other quick things with regard to some projects that I know that you guys are interested in. I believe you all are aware that we have started the shipments of the direct disposition campaign for the U-233 project. You might have heard about that or read about that. That began in December before the end of the year. To date, 3 shipments have been received out in Nevada. And again, the first material that is going are the zipper plates, which we're transferring to NNSA for them to use for future use. Once the zipper plate campaign is complete, we'll then be focusing on direct disposition of the cuss material for disposal. So that's a huge milestone for the program, for the community, for the laboratory, for a lot of different parties and entities, something we're very excited about. And the other big news on the project front is that last Friday we were successful in removing the tank from the Tank W1A project located in the central campus of the Oak Ridge National Lab. So I know that's one that many of you have also been following for some time. And so now that the tank is out of way, it will be easier for the project to continue with excavation of soil. So that's also going very well for us, something we're really excited about. And that's it. That's my summary. Any questions?
Craig?
Yes, on the historic preservation plan.
Mm-hmm.
Has your contractor told you his drop dead date in terms of when he needs to know exactly how he's going to go?
I have a pretty good idea, yes.
You're going to have the plan hopefully finalized before it impacts him.
Yes. Now, one of the things that we are going to do, which you may or may not be interested in, is in the letter when we transmit this next version of the plan, we are going to inform people that we have made the decision to allow the contractor to proceed with some of their procurement activities. It's a risk that we're taking. We're not going to give them permission to do anything to the north end, but we're taking the risk to allow them to get their contracts and other things in place so that they're ready. And that will also assist as well. Yeah.
Any more? Steve?
Will there be another consulting parties agreement in the spring? I mean, meeting?
That's really up to the signatory parties. We believe with the comments that we've received and with the modifications, really improvements that we're making to the plan, that it should not be necessary. Now, one of the things that the signatory parties will want to do is to see this next round of comments. And so it's really up to them, based on those comments, whether they believe that another meeting will be necessary. We are cautiously optimistic, I'll say it that way, that we could have a signed MOA by the end of February. So we'll see. We'll see.
Okay. Ron?
Sue, I noted in your letter that the cost now for the disposition of the zipper plates and the custom material is a fixed number. It's a fixed price contract.
Yes, we
now,
signed a
so-
fixed price
So
contract.
that cost is known before. There was, we thought as much as 800 million maybe, I thought, for the whole disposition of, I don't know where I got that number from, but of the rate of the U-233, but I guess half the material now is a known cost, which only leaves the balance of the material to be determine to be processed.
Right, yeah, the one of the things that we are also close to completing is what the plan will be for phase 2, which is the material that will have to be processed, down blended before it can be disposed of.
And the fixed price for the initial material is how much?
It's 85 million? Is that, yeah, approximately 85 million. I don't remember the exact number offhand, but I can get that for you.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
But in all
Less than
likelihood, it sounds like, because at one time the down blending was going to be a significant cost factor.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like it's going to be anywhere near that, which is what we thought would happen
right.
under this other disposition strategy.
Right, and it's really for a couple of reasons. One is because we have identified a direct either disposal and or alternate use route for about half of the inventory. And the second reason is for the phase 2 materials, what we're considering is processing those materials in already existing facilities at the lab instead of constructing or modifying the building to be able to do that. So,
Good news.
yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to compliment you
Oh, thank you.
on the meeting on the MOA.
Thank you.
That's the first that I have attended where the public was welcome.
Oh, thank you.
There has been a great deal of opacity on that subject. I would ask, when are the meeting minutes going to be available?
Yeah, we do have the transcript from the meeting, and when we put out the next version of the plan, which will be before the end of this month, we are going to identify how people can obtain a copy. So it shouldn't be but a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no additional questions for Sue, we'll move on to our DOE liaison, Dave Adler.
Happy New Year, everybody. I just wanted to mention that we actually have settled on a presentation topic for next month. It's an expansion of basically what we would like to do next month is to give you a presentation on the budget and prioritization tasks that we are about to undertake collectively. Excuse me. Alan Stokes, basically my boss, will be giving the presentation. It will be structured similar to the parallel presentation given last year, but updated to deal with this year's realities. Next month is a good time to do it because we will have just met with mid-level and senior representatives from EPA and TDEC. We will hopefully have gotten some guidance from headquarters on how much money we should be planning against for the 2014 budget, and we'll be in a good spot to basically start soliciting input from the board. With a little luck, I will intrigue enough of you to participate in the the ad hoc budget development subcommittee that we develop every year about this time. So that's the subject for next month, and hopefully we'll get some people to participate in the development of a budget submittal, which will occur a few months later. That's it for me this month.
Okay. Any comments for Dave? Questions? Okay, we'll move on to our EPA liaison, Connie Jones.
Thank you. I'd just like to give some information on a few project updates. The RA and D&D core teams that we're currently calling now met today, and to give you a status on 1070B remedial actions. They're just about finished with that. There are some backfilling activities that need to be implemented, and hopefully I believe the staff said that they would be complete with that around mid-spring. And that's been a project that's been ongoing for about 2 years, and it dealt with circular material as well as some materials of interest that DOE had, so we're very pleased with that. Other than that, I don't have any other announcements, but I'd be more than happy to try to attempt to answer questions if asked. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our TDEC liaison, John Ownsley.
Thank you, ma'am. I too have no announcements, but would be glad to attempt to answer any questions that the board may have. Yes, David. Good. Started to say good morning, but it's not morning anymore. Go ahead.
Somewhere it is. I understand that there was a chromium recovery plant or filter failed, and some chromium got loose on the reservation.
Yes.
Is this going to lead to any fines or penalties?
No, sir, not from the state's perspective at this point in time, but to provide additional background information. There was a release from the chromium water treatment facility. It's a DOE facility operated at ETEP, and it treats chromium it treats chromium contaminated groundwater, and the system froze up. And it is reported that approximately 1,000 gallons of water with concentrations of chromium in the 0.5 parts per million range were released. To date, we haven't determined that any of that entered into the aquatic environment. There was also a bypass from that system to avoid further release to the environment until the problem could be fixed. That bypass basically just released the water untreated into the Clinch River, bypassing the Poplar Creek. That also doesn't cause an environmental issue. But to be clear, the state has not finalized its investigation of that. But at this point in time, we see no violations.
If I can, I just want to add one little detail. When the equipment froze up and malfunctioned, the water was contained within a paved and bermed area. So no releases across the reservation or even across the site. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Any additional questions for John? Okay, at this time we will open our public comment period. Our student representative, Casey McMaster, will call a list of names. We do ask that you go to the front of the room and utilize our microphone.
The public comment period is now open. Susan Gawarecki.
Hi. Okay. Well, I need to express my appreciation for your mastery of my last name. Thank you. Susan Gawarecki, and I'm here representing myself. I just wanted to bring you up to date on what has happened with the LOC. On Monday, my board of directors held a meeting, elected new officers. That was Mayor Tom Behan and Roane County. It was chair and the Roane County mayor, Ron Woody as vice chair, and they immediately dissolved the organization and fired me. So I would just like to say that I will continue to be active in DOE issues. I will express my own opinions from here on out. They will not be constrained by positions taken by my board of directors as they have in the past. And I hope to continue to work with the SSAB committees and help you from the perspectives I've gained working over the past, well, over 15 years with the LOC and several years before that with the League of Women Voters on DOE issues and the history here. But I appreciate the work that you all have put into it, and I'll still be coming around to your meetings. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bill Tews.
I'd like to reserve my question to when Steve talks about the NOHOR.
Okay.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment? As a Citizens Advisory Board to the Department of Energy on environmental cleanup, we want to encourage the community at large to attend and participate at our board and committee meetings. If you are unable to attend, please send in your questions and comments to the address shown. Appropriate comments and questions will be read during the public comment section of the SSAB meeting and will be given the same consideration by the board and DOE as those given in person. Meeting schedules and various ways to communicate with the ORSSAB can be obtained by calling 241-4583 or 241-4584, or by visiting our website. And the public comment period is now closed.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to our presentation for tonight. The topic is Transforming Oak Ridge Through Asset Revitalization, and it will be presented by Mr. Brian Henry. Mr. Henry is the team lead for the Oak Ridge Reindustrialization and Technical Assistance Team. In this position, he is responsible for advancing DOE's reindustrialization efforts at the East Tennessee Technology Park and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, where underutilized DOE assets are transitioned to the private sector to accelerate environmental cleanup and promote economic development. Brian has more than 14 years of federal service working on complex facility and utility projects, including time spent as a civilian employee for the Navy and the Air Force. He has also spent more than 10 years in the private sector in the manufacturing and service industries. Welcome.
Thank you. Before I get started, I'd like to recognize a few people. Kathy Hickey is my EM contractor counterpart. She's the reindustrialization manager for UCOR. JT Howell is my boss. Reindustrialization team is part of one of the teams under the Nuclear Fuel Supply Organization. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Sue Cange, who led the reindustrialization efforts throughout the last decade or more. So with that, we'll get started. I'll start by telling you a little bit about the reindustrialization vision and mission. And we generally update these every 5 years, and that's why you'll see 2017 in the vision. But our vision is to, by 2017, have the program recognized, furthering its position as the model for sustainable, innovative reuse of DOE assets. We are currently the model, and we'd like to get better and improve our position. Our mission, I think most of you may be familiar with it, but our goal is to accelerate cleanup by applying our expertise and promote economic development through making underutilized DOE assets, for example, land, buildings, equipment, technology, available to enhance the development of private sector businesses in the region. And our vision and mission has been changed a little throughout the years, but my first visit to Oak Ridge, I remember coming about 30 years ago. I'm originally from Middle Tennessee, and my first exposure to Oak Ridge was at the American Science Museum, the Oak Ridge. I can't remember the name of it, but I came here as a high school student, and I was really fascinated by Oak Ridge's history and the contribution to the nation. I didn't make it back for another 25 years, but most Oak Ridgers will tell you and are proud of its history. In 1942, about 60,000 acres was taken for the Manhattan Project, and the secret city was first opened to the public in 1949. Throughout the reservation, let's get the pointer here, there are 3 main sites: the Y-12 National Security Complex, the East Tennessee Technology Park, which is the former K-25 gaseous diffusion plant, and this is where the majority of the reindustrialization activities take place. You also have the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. We also have a site there that's being developed under the reindustrialization program. Just for those of you interested, the SNS is the spallation neutron source. How did the reindustrialization program come about? Well, after the Cold War, as the Cold War was ending, DOE was going through a downsizing period, and the gaseous diffusion plant was shut down. And we refer to the years after that, from like 1989 to 1996, as the blight years. So basically you had this large industrial complex. The gates were locked. There was no mission, seemingly no future. There was radiological contamination. There was industrial contaminants. There was very high security. And there was even mixed waste stored on site. So DOE got together with some of the folks at the time and thought, you know, we've got all this out here. It had been seen as a liability, but some of the thinking started changing, and they said, okay, how can we change these liabilities into assets? And we refer to that era as the crossroads. And prior to 1996, as part of the downsizing for DOE, there was some legislation passed called, it was the Section 3161 of the Defense Authorization Act of 1993, established the mechanisms for community reuse organizations to be established. And the intent of those was to help the communities affected by DOE downsizing and replace the DOE jobs with other jobs and bringing aid to those communities to offset the downsizing impacts. The CRO here in Oak Ridge, called the Community Reuse Organization of East Tennessee, was actually established about 1995, and then there was a formal DOE team put together about that same time, and then a contractor team came later. And they all got together, and in my mind, looking back over that, I think there were some real visionaries there. A lot of times you'll hear Jim Hall mentioned as the godfather of reindustrialization. I've heard Robert Brown mentioned as the architect. And I think with other community leaders, they really had a good vision, and their pioneering efforts led to the successes that we enjoy today. As they looked around the site, they realized that they had marketable assets. And those fell into basically 2 categories. There were physical assets, and those included, you know, the buildings, the 1,300 acres of land. There was a lot of comprehensive infrastructure. To operate a gaseous diffusion plant, you needed lots of infrastructure. You need heavy-duty utilities. There was barge. There was rail. There were a lot of assets there that could be reused. There was also a lot of one-of-a-kind equipment that was used in the gaseous diffusion plant, and also other programs that were going out at the time that were sitting there unused. And the non-physical assets, the location, Oak Ridge was a good location. It was ETTP, the East Tennessee Technology Park, is close to the interstate. It's kind of conveniently located near Knoxville. You have Interstate 40, you have Interstate 75 in close proximity. As I mentioned, there were utility, emergency, and telecommunication services. And Oak Ridge has also been known for its technology, so there was technology that was available that wasn't necessarily being put to use. There was a trained workforce, which has been key, and I think it's one of the things that continues to attract a lot of companies to Oak Ridge. Strategic partnerships. Whenever we talk about reindustrialization, we always go back to the partnerships that have been established and maintained, because those are really the keys to our success. In the early years, say from 1996 to about 2002, the main mechanisms available for reindustrialization was through leases. Early on in establishing what is reindustrialization and what marketable assets do we have out here, the leaders at that time created an industry day where they invited private companies and private sector input to come to Oak Ridge and say, out of everything we've got here, what interests the private sector? And some unsolicited proposals came out of that, and that set part of the stage for the success during the leasing heyday. There were some bartering arrangements where equipment or other materials were exchanged for cleanup services and or space. One example of that was building 1401, which was fairly large, and it was full of machine tools, machining equipment. And that type of equipment was very valuable, very expensive, and so that attracted at least one tenant to that building. And the Crow was established, like I said, back in about the 96, and early on it was subsidized through DOE, through grants and other monies. But the general idea was that the Crows needed to get to the point where they were self-sustaining. And the key to that here in Oak Ridge was making buildings and equipment and land available to Crowet from DOE so that they could lease it and bring in revenue. And that revenue allowed Crowet to function, and it also allowed them to reinvest in the site. And that was a key early event that led to the success. Now, where DOE benefits through leasing facilities to Crowet, who leases them to the private sector, is DOE no longer has to pay surveillance and maintenance costs. We no longer had to pay the utilities for the building. So it was a win-win situation and also brought a lot of jobs. At the height of the leasing program in 2002, there were about 90 leases in place with 40 companies, and there were 400 private sector jobs. So that went a long way to offsetting some of the DOE downsizing. In 2003, the reindustrialization program changed a bit. About that time is when EM started the accelerated cleanup program. And there was also 10 CFR 770 legislation that set the stage for DOE to have the ability to transfer land and buildings, which moved the program from a focus on leasing to working toward transitioning land and buildings to Crowet and to the private sector to establish a more permanent presence. This picture here shows you the changes in the site that have occurred since accelerated cleanup began. The buildings in yellow are no longer there. They've been demolished under the EM program. The east wing of K-25, a large section of that could go yellow now because the current contractor is taking that building down as we speak. What's hatched in red is land that has transferred to the community reuse organization, some of which has also been sold to private sector companies. The buildings in red are buildings that are either leased or transferred. And as you can see, almost the entire front of the site is now in private hands. It has private roads, public roads and public utilities. There have been about a little over a dozen buildings transferred to date to Crowet and the City of Oak Ridge. A couple are fairly small, but in all total, they represent more than 330,000 square foot of space that, rather than being torn down, was made available for reuse. These are 9 of the larger buildings shown here. Out of those, 5 have been sold to private interests. 1 is currently available for sale, and the other 3 continue to be leased. I said there were about a little more than a dozen. The fire station is one building that was transferred to the city. The water treatment plant was transferred to the city, and there were a couple of small buildings that were transferred in a different area. This is a picture of the Heritage Center. ETTP, Crowett, in marketing the property, came up with the concepts of the main plant where K25 is located is called the Heritage Center. There's a greenfield site that I'll show you a little later that's called the Horizon Center. And out at the Heritage Center, which is, like I said, where most of the cleanup is going on, what's in purple shows you the approximately 100 acres of land that have transferred to Crowett and or the city and are now in the private hands. Where you're currently working, in light purple, are some of the areas that we're currently working on transfer or that are envisioned for future transfer. There are a couple of spec buildings. This area down here was a couple of the first land parcels that were transferred. Crowett, in conjunction with the Oak Ridge Industrial Development Board and also in partnership with TVA, constructed a 50,000 square foot speculative building on one of the transferred parcels. That building is now sold. They also constructed about a 16,000 square foot building that's located, you can see it in this master plan here, and it's located approximately there. And that spec building is still available for sale. The land transfers also support EM's goal of footprint reduction. So in addition to accelerating cleanup, the reindustrialization program through these transfers is working to reduce EM's footprint. There is additional land available for energy park use. The energy park concept developed a few years ago, and the thought was some of this land that DOE is making available could be used to support renewable energy projects. And there actually are some, Crowett has planted some of the land in switchgrass, which is a biofuel. One of the parcels has been sold, and a company is developing a 200 megawatt, or 200 kilowatt, I'm sorry, megawatt would be very large, but a 200 kilowatt solar demonstration project, and that's going to be located right here. There's another company that's working with Crowett and is looking to put 175 megawatt. I'm an electrical engineer. I like to think in terms of megawatt, but I need to scale down. 175 kilowatt solar project in the 85 area. And what's unique about that one is that one will actually track the sun, and so it will be more efficient. So we hope that will go through in the future, and we're hoping that some of the land that we're transferring and making available, more of it will be used for those type renewable energy applications. Before I took over as the team lead, one of my main roles was working with the city on transferring infrastructure. We've worked hard over the years and through some innovative agreements and working with the city, we've managed to transfer utility systems to the city. And part of that is when private sector, to entice private sector to locate there, they're used to public access, public utilities, and that was one of the goals as we transferred land in the front of the site, was to make the front of the site as much like any other place in the city as we could. And that means private land, public utilities, public roads. The first large transfer out of ETTP at the Heritage Center occurred in 2008. And in that transfer, we actually transferred the water treatment plant out at ETTP to the city. So the city began producing the water and providing it to the west end. We also transferred the majority of the water lines to the city. We transferred a a large portion of the sanitary sewer to the city. There was a sewage treatment plant on site that was aging, and we need to make it available for D&D. We had to provide a long-term solution there. So that's one of the successes. So in order to treat the wastewater at ETTP, we had to get it to the City of Oak Ridge's Rarity Ridge plant. So in order to do that, the city actually did a project. It was in the $2 million range to expand the Rarity Ridge sewage treatment plant. Croat did a project to actually build a lift station and force main and build and pump it through the site under the Clinch River and get it to the Rarity Ridge treatment plant. All of that was done leading up and prior to that 2008 time frame. And after that, we bought water from the city and also sent our wastewater to the city. And also the private industry out there does the same. As we transferred land, one of the other large efforts was to get public roads out there. So in the front of the site, we worked with the city over a number of years, and we actually transferred about 1.3 miles of streets in the front of the site so that the land that had been transferred, as it was broken up into parcels, had public access. And that's very important to banks. If someone's trying to locate there and they want to get financing, they have to have public access. We've been working on transferring the electrical distribution system for the last few years. We broke that down into 3 phases. We transferred the majority of the lines outside the plant first. Then we transitioned from being fed at the site from TVA to the City of Oak Ridge, and that happened the last year. We're now working on transitioning the lines inside the main plant that will be there after all the cleanup is done to the city. We also transferred the natural gas system, and we transferred that to the Oak Ridge Utility District, who is the local provider. Work on all of these continues as we continue to transfer land. We are working on additional roadway transfers. We're working to transfer additional water lines to serve the areas that are to be transferred in the future. Another large win-win, I believe, for DOE and the city was the transfer of the fire station out at ETTP at the Heritage Center to the city. And this occurred in 2008. And as part of that transfer, we reached agreement with the city, and they also now provide fire and emergency response services to ETTP and the surrounding area. That agreement saved DOE millions of dollars per year over what we were paying our contractor. And I'll talk about the financial benefits of reindustrialization later. But that was a big one, and a lot of people worked hard on that one. The finish line. Once the cleanup is complete, and the end state out at Heritage Center is intended to be a private sector, sustainable business industrial park. We hope that also includes some additional renewable energy uses, and the idea is that it's compatible with the nearby residential and commercial developments. Jobs being created is a big plus to offset the jobs at DOE that will be going away as cleanup is completed. Funds are being saved, and I'll talk about that. And the site is remediated center. And actually, I want to talk a little bit about the financial benefits because I confused another one of my presentations. I don't have that slide in here, I don't think. But DOE has saved lots of money and accelerated cleanup because we've avoided demolition costs for the buildings that have been transferred. We've avoided surveillance and maintenance costs for leased or transferred buildings. We've also avoided paying utilities for those buildings. And the transition of the utility systems, buying those services from the city, has also saved in the neighborhood of a couple $1 million a year too. So the reindustrialization efforts have, in my mind, been hugely successful and a benefit to DOE and the city in creating jobs, reducing DOE's cost out there, and allowing those monies to be used to go toward further cleanup. I wasn't confusing. I do have that slide. That's what happens when you work on two presentations at once. But this is the financial benefits. As I pointed out, you've got the avoided surveillance and maintenance, is what S&M stands for. The avoided demolition, early bartering agreements saved considerable amounts of money, and what I was alluding to earlier are the utilities, infrastructure, fire protection, emergency response. When we calculate everything we've saved looking backward, that's approximately $100 million. We continue to realize annual savings, and those are in the neighborhood of about $6 million. And we still have other buildings out there that are potential reuse candidates. We still have other utilities that DOE is still providing. So there are savings out there as we continue our efforts. The establishment of the Heritage Center, when most people think of ETTP, they think of the Heritage Center, is part of a larger picture. This area outlined in red is the Oak Ridge Reservation. This area here is a large area set aside as the Three Bend Scenic and Wildlife Refuge. Clark Center Park, if you've been there, is located in that area. You've got Y12, SNS, you've got ORNL. There's also some ORISE facilities. This is the Horizon Center, which is a greenfield area. Directly behind both the Heritage Center and Horizon Center is a large conservation area called the Black Oak Ridge Conservation Easement. In light purple over here across the river, you have Rarity Ridge. This area in, I'm going to call it orange, is owned by the Tennessee Valley Authority, and it's the site of the former Clinch River breeder reactor, and TVA is pursuing putting a couple of small modular reactors in that area. And then what's in brown is the main ETTP site called the Heritage Center where most of the active cleanup is going on. Now, reindustrialization also has worked to create in the center or within the Oak Ridge National Laboratory what's called the Oak Ridge Science and Technology Park. And I'll talk about it in a minute also. Horizon Center, this was the greenfield development I just pointed out. About 500 acres was transferred to Crowett. It was the first transfer in the DOE complex under the 10 CFR 770 legislation. And it's listed here as a 1,000-acre greenfield site. About 500 acres that were set aside as natural areas, DOE still owns those. And about 500 acres was transferred. Since we transferred to Crowett, this area here shown on the master development plan has been transferred to the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, and that's also being set aside for conservation. Crowett recently, within the last few years, transferred the undeveloped parcels of Horizon Center to the Oak Ridge Industrial Development Board, who is now responsible for the continued development of that. And we work closely with that group and Crowett on development out here. If you've heard of the carbon fiber pilot manufacturing plant, that's also out here at Horizon Center. And it's not in your presentations because I just recently got a picture today of that facility, so I threw it into the presentation, but it's located about there. Theragenics, I think, was the first company located out there. This is I believe, the Theragenics facility. Phylotechnics is located near the back of the plant. There are other companies that have bought land or are planning to build out at the Horizon Center, so we hope to see a lot more development occurring out there in the near future. The Oak Ridge Science and Technology Park. Again, this park is located right inside the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. The purpose of the park is to promote commercialization and technology transfer for the research that goes on at the lab. It was the first privately developed research and development park located within a DOE national laboratory. ProtoServe constructed in the front of that park the National Security Engineering Center, and we also leased to Crowett a building out there that has been renovated and upgraded, and it became the Halcyon Commercialization Center. And the idea there is to bring companies that are interested in ORNL technology, get them on site right alongside the researchers, give them a place to work, and try to transition that technology into real products. And as that occurs, and hopefully some of those products turn into successes that then go into large-scale manufacturing, and with our other parks, the Heritage Center and the Horizon Center, the intent is as those manufacturers develop that we retain those jobs here in Oak Ridge. So it's all part of a larger picture. Again, one of the keys to success, and one of, in my mind, is part of the fundamental keys to success, is our partnership strategies. And DOE has not done this alone. We've worked in concert with EPA, TDEC, Crowett, the City of Oak Ridge, the Oak Ridge Economic Partnership, and making all that happen. There have been lots of challenges, but none of it could have been achieved without working with all of those partners. One of the greatest challenges in attracting private industry to a site like ETTP is the difference in the mentality and the mindset and what the culture at the site versus what private industry expects. When you've got a DOE site, we've got our nuclear safety requirements, we've got construction work, demolition work going on. We have lots of temporary facilities. You'll see the heavy equipment out there as buildings come down. As far as security, we have limited areas, fenced off areas. You have to have a badge. And private industry is more interested in attractive work locations, being able to park near where they're working. In general, they want open access. And they also operate to different rules, whereas the DOE contractors and the DOE folks out there and the folks working for DOE operate under DOE orders, regulations. Private industry works under OSHA and TOSHA and those type regulations. So it's been a challenge to work through that and to have the two different sectors coexisting. I think there have been a lot of innovative solutions put in place. I'll give you an example. To cover the federal OSHA and TOSHA, federal OSHA wouldn't take property until it actually transferred. So we've got private sector out here on site in leased facilities with no federal OSHA or TOSHA oversight. So reindustrialization program hired an expert from outside to bring in and become part of the team who had both DOE experience and experience in the federal OSHA and TOSHA world. And he's actually is qualified to be an instructor in OSHA and actually still teaches classes. So he's provided he's covered the gap in the time between when that responsibility actually transferred to federal OSHA and TOSHA. And we recently, as things transferred, we've transferred that responsibility. It's just been recently that we transferred responsibility for a large part of the site. For most of that 180 acres and most of the transferred buildings are now under the oversight of federal OSHA and TOSHA. And that's been a huge win for us too. I'll go back here. One of the other things we've tried to do is, as the cleanup has progressed, we've tried to open up the areas of the site that where the cleanup work is finished, and as we've transferred land. So we have shrunk fences, removed fences, and we do have areas out there where a badge is no longer required. In answering the question of why we've been successful, I think the perfect storm analogy is a good one. A lot of things came together at the right time for us to have the success that we have today. Accelerated cleanup started that, and that timing coincided with kind of like the height of the success of the reindustrialization program. A strong community reuse organization here in East Tennessee. There were back when the Crow legislation was set up, there were multiple Crows set up throughout the country. If the number is correct, I believe it was in the neighborhood of 15. There's a CRO in Paducah, there's one in Portsmouth, there's one in Savannah River, there's one in Hanford. But out of those 15, today, probably less than half of that still exist. And our CRO is one of the strongest in the DOE complex, and that's been a large reason for our success. I mentioned earlier Robert Brown and Gerald Boyd. They both played a large role, starting with Jim Hull, but DOE senior management has always been strong proponents of the reindustrialization program and have been key to its success. And, through the hard work of Sue and some of the early reindustrialization folks, they partnered with EPA and TDEC to establish how do we go about establishing a lease and showing that it's safe for private sector workers to work out here on the site. So they established all the processes and worked through to allow us today to do something that's almost routine. And those partnerships have also been a large reason for our success. The lessons learned, one of the key lessons learned is, and it does create challenges, but we have learned that reindustrialization can occur in parallel with cleanup. You don't have to wait until the site's completely cleaned up before you do something with it. And a key to that is establishing partnerships and communicating early and often. We try to meet with all of our partners as much as we can and have regular communications with them also. Another lesson learned is you have to know the site and the pitfalls. The early teams discovered a lot of those pitfalls and identified them. So today we have a pretty good handle on what those are, and we can work through those and try to address them. Adequate time to meet requirements. That's something that most folks in the DOE world know, that it takes time to get things done and to go through all the steps that we have to allow for. And we've got those processes down pretty good today, but it still takes us a year to a year and a half to transfer property. In some cases, it still takes us 6 months to 9 months to put a lease in place, and that's because we have to go through all of those processes. We're working to shorten those. Early successes were key, and I think, as I mentioned during the leasing heyday, the reindustrialization team enjoyed a lot of early successes. Set high goals. I think, looking back, I came in 2005, and the reindustrialization program had already existed for about 7 years. It's amazing to me the foresight that those early leaders had establishing this program and setting the stage for the later successes. And I believe this is the last slide. And if you would like more information, there is a website you can go to, and that will give you, there are some maps there, and you can look at and give you more information. And feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you could think of after the meeting tonight, or just discuss any topic related to reindustrialization. And I think we have set aside some time for questions. So
we do. Questions? Greg?
Yes.
Thank you. Simple question. This morning's Knoxville paper said another car company wants to build a plant in Chattanooga. How are you marketing, or is anyone marketing what is physically here and how it can be used by whatever car dealer? I don't remember who it was.
Well, one of the things, when Volkswagen came, I think the requirement for their Tier 1 suppliers is they have to be located within 75 miles of the plant. And those numbers may not be exact, but we fit that. So we are located within that frame. So a Tier 1 supplier to those car companies could locate a DTTP. We work, DOE does not necessarily do the marketing. We work with Crowett. We also work with the Oak Ridge Economic Partnership, Kim Denton's group. We have regular meetings. We call it the Economic Development Working Group.
Actively marketing.
Yeah, and they look to all those opportunities and try to. We also go to conferences throughout the country where we can try to tell our story and entice people to come here.
Tom?
You mentioned the savings on maintenance, et cetera,
Mhm.
and that it's available for cleanup. Is it available for cleanup in a very specific way?